Ladies and gentlemen, good morning. Recording has started. So, I'm assuming Vortex Lord is on the internet. He has closed circuit.
Well, we need to give him a shout out so it's just right.
Alright. This week, we started our last unit of the year, dealing with waves and light and sound. This week, we are doing some generic wave things, talking about some terms, talking about some ideas and concepts dealing with waves. Then next week, we will apply those terms, ideas, and concepts to light and to sound. Then we're looking at review and test the last week of school, that week after Memorial Day, then exams coming after that. I told my other class that I'd probably give you guys tests back around here, around the 25th of May, so you can start looking at those things, getting ready for your exam, which is not following.
What's the schedule?
They give it to you in homework. Were you guys to say, go to the office. I think you guys are
Is
first.
12th period in the middle of one?
No, it's the end. It's on the end of Wednesday.
No,
8 block.
It's
It's
in
at
the
the beginning of
It's at the beginning of Wednesday, I thought.
Yeah, Wednesday.
357, 4,
What
2,
about-
4, 6.
what about our study hall? Is that
It's in the middle.
Why is that one always in the middle?
I know.
All right. On Monday, we introduced the topic of waves. We talked about what a wave was. So, what is a wave?
A disturbance
A dis-
transfers energy.
Disturbance that transfers energy. Good. And more specifically, this week we've been talking about mechanical waves. Okay, a mechanical wave has to have a material to travel through, which we call a medium. Yesterday, we started getting into wave properties and how we measure waves, and how we describe waves. And yesterday, I believe we got through two terms. Is that correct? First term we got through was period. Period is a time. It's a time to complete one full cycle. Okay? For a pendulum, that would be the time it takes for it to start over here on the left, go all the way over to the right, but then go all the way back to the left. A full cycle. Okay? But sometimes that doesn't take very long for a vibration to create a full cycle. So sometimes it's useful for us to measure the frequency of the vibration. The frequency being the numbers of cycles that occurs every second. We talked about that frequency gets measured in its own unit. We call it unit hertz. We represent that with the capital H, lowercase c. And we talked about that frequency and period have a relationship. Yes? Right? What kind of relationship for frequency and period? Inverse relationship. So if we know the frequency, we can figure out the period. If we take 1 over the frequency, we'll get the period. If we know the period, we can figure out the frequency. If you take 1 over the period, that'll give you the frequency. Okay. Good there? All right. I believe this is where we left off today. Is that correct? Okay. So, next term that we use to describe wave is wavelength. Wavelength is represented by a Greek letter. That Greek letter is a lowercase lambda. It's an upside down Y. Okay. Depending on whether you, this is how the computer writes it here without any of the curly cues. Sometimes you'll see it has a little light thing on the top. These two are the same. Those two are the same. This is just, I'm not sure what I was doing. Disregard that one on the right.
Why don't you erase it?
I can, but actually these two are connected together. And so if I erase one after the other one, which I probably should, but I just keep forgetting to. Whenever it says, hey, do you want to save your changes, I always say no. And shows up again next time Anyway, as far as wavelength goes, like its name suggests, it is a distance. It is a distance that is between the same point on two waves that are next to each other. So if we want to end up or know the same point on two waves that are next to each other, we could measure it a couple ways. What are some ways that we could measure it? Okay, the crest of a wave is the same, and when the next crest shows up, that means the next wave starts. So I can measure it crest to crest. Okay, highest point, right? If you're talking about a what most of us think a wave looks like, right? That highest point. Or you can go lowest point to lowest point. You can go trough to trough. Should be the same distance.
Make sure you give us enough room. Maybe you didn't give us enough room on the first one. Disappointing.
Maybe I'm trying to just conserve it, make it waves. But wavelength also has an inverse relationship with the frequency. If frequency increases, if we're piling up more waves in the same space, what has to be true about those waves? They can't be as big. They got to be shorter, right? They got to be smaller. So wavelength and frequency also have an inverse relationship. Yes, ma'am. Well, not so much taking up space, but if we talk about like if I say longitudinal wave, does that work for you?
Yeah.
Okay. Remember we said that longitudinal wave is like a compression and then a rarefaction, compression, rarefaction. If you look at wavelength, it's the distance between compression and compression. But it's not necessarily like nothing else can exist in that space. It's not like matter, where you can only have this bit of matter here and then the other thing can only go right next to it. We can have other waves in that space, or you might have some matter in that space as well, but it still would, the wavelength would still be the distance between crest to crest. It's just not necessarily the only thing that's there. Does that make sense?
Yeah.
If I'm increasing the frequency, that means that more compressions are fit into the same space, right? So if there's more compressions in that same space or in that same time, right, the distance is going to have to get smaller and smaller and smaller. Okay. Good there? All right. Some pictures. Oh, inverse relationship. Frequency and wavelength have an inverse relationship. Just like frequency and period have an inverse relationship. So as far as these pictures go, they're just showing that idea, right? That on the left-hand side here, 1 cycle per second, 2 cycles per second. But if you're going to take 2 waves in the same amount of time that one wave needs to take, how big does that wave have to be? Got to be short. Okay. Let me grab this picture here. As far as measuring the wavelength goes, we said we could measure it crest to crest or trough to trough, and we should see that that distance should be the same, right? Or we could start it in the middle. But if you're going to start it in the middle, you got to make sure that you go up and then down and up, because that's one full wave. Does that make sense? Okay. If you think about it, let me see if I can draw this right. I go up, come back down, go down, and come back up. Okay? If I put all these together, what do I end up with? It's kind of like it's an oval, but more importantly, it's a big circle, right? I end up right back where I started, which is what a wave is all about. Okay? If I go something like this, like crest to crest, right? Here, 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 and there, right? I've hit all 4 of those parts again, just in a different order. And that's important when we're talking about wavelength. It's got to be one full wave, okay? That's good.
So is the cycle like if they were both up or like and then down, or is it like up then
It's
down?
Up and then down is one cycle. Yeah, Alex, you have to get back around to where you came from, right? So if you start up high, you got to go down low, then come back up high, right? If you're talking about going crest to crest. Or trough to trough, you start low, you got to go up high, then come back down low, right? If you start in the middle, that's where it gets a little confusing. But if you go high, you got to go low, so you got to include the whole thing. Good. All right. Next turn. Next term is amplitude. And there is definitely some things that improve sound. An amp does what? What does an amp do?
It makes the guitar noise louder.
It makes the guitar noise louder, right? So amplitude, we use capital letter A, right? The amplitude, by definition, is the maximum displacement of the medium from its rest position. Sorry. Just want you guys to know you're the only ones that have complained about this. Actually, most classes have a cap to it, you guys. Maybe there will be more complaints later. Or maybe you're just feeling a bit salty.
There's so many like big handwriting on the
Yes, ma'am.
like that. It goes farther, so it's louder.
Yes. In sound, when we talk about sound, amplitude relates to how loud it is. But let's talk more in general, okay? Let's say this is a string. I'm just making waves, right? I'm shaking my hand to make waves in it. If I want to make bigger amplitude waves, what do I have to do? I have to go higher, right? I have to move my hand farther. Remember, how does a wave start? What do we have to do to start a wave? We have to do work. If I'm moving my hand farther, how much work am I doing? More work. So what does the amplitude of a mechanical wave tell you about that wave? How much work, which relates to what? How much energy, right? What did we say a wave was? A transfer of energy. So what tells you about the energy of the wave? The amplitude of a mechanical wave tells you how much energy it carries. Good. Should. Glad it does.
I am too.
I'll be even more glad when I take my test. So close. I thought I had you guys.
Is it lower notes or higher notes that have the more amplitude?
So, Nick, good question. We'll talk about more. We'll talk about this more when we talk about sound specifically. But the sound, the amplitude relates to the volume, not to the pitch. Okay. So lower notes don't necessarily have lower amplitude. They have lower frequency. I can have a note that has a low frequency but a big amplitude. That it would be a loud low note. Does that make sense? Okay. So how tall or short these peaks are tells you nothing about what pitch the sound is. It'll tell you how loud it is, but not necessarily what note it is. Does that make sense? Because an amp doesn't, like an amp on a guitar, it doesn't change the notes. What does it do? It just makes it louder, right? It controls the amplitude of the wave, but not necessarily what notes are being made. Caroline, go ahead.
What makes it louder?
The fact that it's more energy, right? Remember we talked about that with sound waves. My vocal cords are vibrating, and they're doing work on the air around my vocal cords. That energy is transferred to the air in my mouth, through the room, to your eardrum. What happens to your eardrum then, when that energy hits it? It vibrates. If more energy hits it, how far is it going to vibrate? Farther, right? And your brain interprets that as a louder sound.
So what does a deaf person, does their eardrums not vibrate?
Either their eardrum doesn't vibrate, or there's a problem with the message from their earbud to their brain. Okay? Yeah. Generally people who are born deaf, they have some kind of a disease or something that messes with the nerves that connect their ear and their brain. But somebody who has become deaf over time, generally there's damage to their eardrum. Well, if your eardrum is just a real thin piece of skin, basically. And if it moves a lot and a lot and a lot, right, it'll eventually either rip or tear or just kind of wear out.
You get in your earphones?
Yeah, You know who Pete Townsend is?
My
He's a
grandpa,
he's a guitar player for the Who.
Oh.
So, but he's basically legally deaf because he's he's a rock star. I don't know. I mean, I think a lot of it has to do more with like from what I understand, more of the repeated, listen, the loud music. It's like, I mean, musicians, a lot of times musicians, like when they play concerts, will actually have earplugs in.
Or
They can
headphones.
hear it, they can feel it, you can still hear it, it's just not quite as loud, right? Like if you wear, I don't know if you've ever done this before, right? But if you use like yard equipment, like riding a lawnmower or weed whacker or anything, you can wear like safety headphones. You can still hear stuff. It's just not as
or
loud.
like shooting.
Oh, is that like?
Or when or like if you
Is
start
that like
shooting.
Shooting when it gets like when it gets to a point that's too loud for your ears, like it, like your ears, no, like you can't, like the headphones, like they make it so you can't hear anything. I don't know, like you shoot, no, like
Like, is that what when you're done like mowing lawns and stuff, like it's fuzzy?
A lot of times,
Your
do
things,
you wear like ear protection when you mow the lawn? No, it's okay. I didn't for a real long. I didn't for a real long time. I do now. But Nick, with that, a lot of it is like we can't remember if we talked about this in here yesterday or not, but after you've listened to music for a long time, if you go to a concert or something, you get that like ringing in your ear,
Yeah.
right? Because a lot of it is kind of like a fatigue thing. Like your eardrum is tired from like moving so much, and even though the vibration isn't there anymore, like your ear is still sending a message, like that it's still getting some vibrations, even though it's not anymore. It's kind of like it's just tired, and so it sends the wrong message.
is your eardrum's kind of like a muscle?
It's more like a piece of skin, but it's connected to some bones that vibrate back and forth, and that's where the message comes from. That's a real like very brief version of how your ear works. So, go ahead.
how come like you hear the loud noises, sometimes you get a headache, like what is that?
That I think a lot of is your brain's response. Like if you hear a loud noise, it moves your eardrum a lot to the point where it's probably, this is speculation, but it's probably a message like, hey, this hurts. And Christian, your pain is your response to something that's not good for your body, right? That's why things hurt, so you stop doing them. So if you get a headache, a lot of times it's probably because your ear is sending that message, hey, this isn't working for me. If you don't make it stop, it's gonna, right? Or it's gonna be bad, yeah, right? So, or it's the repeated response of your brain to that stimulus, being like, okay, this hurts, I gotta make it, this hurts, I gotta stop this. Okay, Chris, go ahead.
Has anybody ever tried getting a replacement eardrum?
I don't know if they've done that, because it's not just as simple as the eardrum vibrating. There's a connection to your eardrum and the three bones in your ear, the hammer and the stirrup and whatever. There's like three little bones in your ear, like the smallest bones in your body, and they vibrate when your eardrum vibrates. So it's not just it's not like replacing the head on the drum, but the drum works again. Right? It's more complex than that. But I mean, I'm assuming people have looked into it.
It's like my dad had stepped in one year and he's had surgery. He has like prosthetic bones, like the little ones. Like
Yeah.
You can't really hear, but it's better than it used to.
That makes sense.
What are your little ear bones?
What?
Your
Hearing aids basically work amplitude, that they basically just increase the
My
volume.
grandpa, whenever you put your hands too close to the thing, they make like a buzzing sound. It's really funny. I mess with it a lot. It's terrible.
That's on recording. So. All right, two more, and let's go on. Okay, Sam, go.
What about like your vocal cords when you're sick or something? Is that something?
That's more, Sam. That's more that when you're sick, a lot of times you get like phlegmy in here, and now your vocal cords can't vibrate as well as what they're supposed
So
to
when
do.
you like lose your voice, that one has like.
A lot of times, if you lose your voice, there's some kind of swelling or something in there, so your vocal cords can't vibrate. Now, it's actually, they can, because you can still sort of talk, but it's not very loud,
Right.
because the amplitude of the waves that you're creating isn't as big, so it's quiet, but
So if like sound waves go better through solids, then like
They go faster
Faster
through
through
sound. Yes. But not, I mean, better is sort of a relative term. Nick, your ear is made to pick up sound waves that travel through air. Technically, the sound travels faster through a solid than it does through a gas, but your ear isn't necessarily designed to pick up those
so
vibrations.
solids don't amplify.
Not necessarily, no. They make it go faster, which is actually a good transition to our next thing.
So wouldn't that be like a lower frequency? That's why it sounds like a pop.
It's more, it's not so much of the lower frequency, it's more how does your eardrum vibrate? And it's, your eardrum is made to vibrate from a vibration that's passing through the gas. Alright, good. Generally, what's going to happen to the amplitude of a wave as it goes along?
Shrink.
It gets lower, right? Just like the amplitude of a pendulum would be how far does it swing, right? It'll lose energy, exactly, right? So when you're too far away to hear something, right? It's because the amplitude of that wave has gotten so small that it just can't make your eardrum move anymore. There's not enough energy there, or not enough for your brain to pick it up. Okay? All right, next. Wave speed. Let's do definition first. That's what the writing.
Is that water?
Okay. What?
Is that water?
No, it's underlining something that will show up in a second.
Why do you have that?
I can't, you know the program that I use to like write on the board? I can use it to actually write on my PowerPoint to take some notes, and it'll save it in the PowerPoint as a picture. But then
Oh, so it's like easier to.
yeah, but it shows up like right away, so you know. So wave speed, speed that the disturbance travels through a medium. Write this one down, Grace. That the speed of a wave we can calculate by taking its wavelength and multiplying it by its frequency.
How do you make these bonds on the computer?
I use tables in Word.
Wait, turn off the fan.
That's not me. It really doesn't smell that bad here.
No, it's just a
Wow. That's way better than that. All right. Speed. Again, kind of transitioning from what we just discussed. The speed of a wave will depend on the medium that it travels through. It travels much faster through a solid than it does through a gas, okay? But if you're talking about two gases, or the same gas, if you change the conditions, you can change how fast the speed of the wave travels through it. Okay? The best practical example that I can give here is for my marching band people. Okay? Right? When you go and play in the last football game of the year, how does it sound?
Wow.
Most people say it sounds crappier.
Oh, I do.
Okay. Because what's different about the air that you're playing in versus the beginning of the season?
Oh, is it sad?
It's sad.
Like at the beginning, oh yeah, football season, and then like
The
yeah.
air is
Oh, I feel like people.
No.
Yeah.
It's like the air. I suppose the air might be filled with sadness, I suppose, which could change its density. But
Well, the air has
it's anyway,
It's hard cool.
it's more cold, which affects the rate at which the wave travels through the air. Right? It generally goes slower because those particles move slower, so they don't run into each other quite as much. And that messes with the frequency and the wavelength of those waves that you've created. Okay? From what I understand, it makes everything sound a little flat. Is that correct? Okay? That when we go outside and it makes everything sound flat. Okay? Which is also the reason why, if you have a really good music hall, like Severance Hall or something like that, it is. How'd you hate Severance Hall?
We went there like 3 years in a
Nails,
row,
nails
and
so
like
It's like
and like
it's
furnished
actually
it, and oh,
it's actually I was something online the other day. It's like rated one of the top 5 places to see a musical performance in the country.
I really don't want to offend anybody here, but orchestras to be
I love orchestra.
I'm not saying that. Anyway, but really good music venues, like a concert hall, stuff like that, will have a really good temperature control system, because if it changes the temperature, that can affect the pitch and the wavelength of the waves.
So is
that are
it
being
usually
created.
cold or hot?
It's usually the same. That's the
What's
biggest.
specific?
Generally, probably like in the low 70s.
That's why
Because if
I like the
you get too hot, if it gets too hot, that will change the pitch and the frequency on the other end, right? So instead of making it flat, it makes everything sound a little sharp, I guess, right? Does that happen in the summertime?
Yeah.
Okay, so you can change, it changes both ways. And there's a happy medium somewhere there, but changing the temperature in extreme either way does cause that change. Very good.
Well, like, if there's a ton of people inside a concert hall, like,
Right.
what is the temperature difference?
Yes.
The actual temperature down.
Well, yeah. Generally, like PAC in general, when we go in there, like if we have an assembly in there or something, when we go in there, it's freezing in there because, well, one, it's a big, huge space, and to heat it takes a lot of money. And if we don't use it very often, we don't heat it. But when a lot of people get in there, the temperature does increase. So you have to take that into account if you're being like really picky about it. So, okay. Good there. All right. Next. Maybe not. Oh, the next thing that comes up is just some example calculations. I'm pretty confident you guys can do those on your own. Okay. So let's slide down to the end of this. Outline. Doppler effect. We've already talked about Doppler effect, so let's just cover it again real quick, right? So Doppler effect is a change in the frequency. A change in the frequency of a wave that is caused by motion, right? So the 2 blanks on the second line, the one on the left, so it's a change in the frequency of a wave that is caused by the motion of the source or the motion of the observer. There is some motion that's involved there.
Sorry, what's where a change in that?
Frequency that's caused by the motion of the source or the motion of the observer. And this picture illustrates that idea.
It's the motion
Yeah,
of the source.
exactly. Of the observer, right? Yeah, it's the same picture that we used when we were talking about star stuff. Okay. So, if we talk here on the left, the fire truck is moving towards the person that is listening. If the distance between the source and the observer is decreasing,
It's moving away.
no, they're getting closer. Either the fire truck is getting closer to the guy, or the guy is getting closer to the fire truck. Either way, we will see an increase in the frequency of that sound wave or those waves in general, which results in a higher pitch. No, an increase in frequency means what's happening. It means that we're getting closer together, more waves in the same space, right? Which, sound wave-wise, Miriam, sound waves, that means that it's a higher pitch. Whereas on the other side, if the distance is increasing, either because the fire truck is moving away or because the person is moving away, we see a decrease in frequency, which results in a lower pitch. Miriam, go ahead. So it has to do with the idea, Miriam, that we're creating these waves, but the next wave isn't created from the same spot the previous wave was created from. Does that make sense? If the fire truck and the person are still, each wave needs to travel the same distance as the previous wave to get to the observer's ears. Okay? But if the fire truck is now moving away from the person, the first wave gets emitted from here, but then the next wave gets emitted from here. Because the fire truck is moving backwards or farther away from the person. So that means that the distance that wave needs to travel is a greater distance.
So how does it fit in?
Because the fire truck is moving, right? The siren is creating the waves. But if the siren is moving, now those waves aren't being emitted from the same spot each time. So the distance that they have to travel is greater, so that means that the time that it takes for them to reach your ear keeps getting longer, and that's a lower frequency. Okay. Same thing works on the other side, same thing, just now the time between those waves keeps increasing because the distance they have to travel isn't as far. So the time between the waves increases or decreases in higher frequency, blah, blah, blah. All right, good there?
We actually finished.
I know. We were supposed to do that yesterday, but that's all right.
Wait, did we have to write?
You don't have to write anything. That question might come up.
You always say that.
Because you don't.
Would you be
You
mad
don't
if I
have
asked
to.
you to repeat?
When we repeat it for you repeat what we just talked about?
Sure.
Do you want me to? I didn't mean to put you on the spot like that. You don't want to. So, Stan, when we talk about that, if the distance between the source of the waves and the person that's listening, or the observer, is getting smaller, they're getting closer together, the frequency of those waves will increase, and that results in a higher pitch.
What is higher pitch?
Higher pitch means it's like a higher note.
I
So
mean,
the
like, I
waves
get
are
that.
getting smaller, which makes the pitch higher.
The frequency of the waves is getting higher.
I feel like
Allison,
we're supposed
that
to-
sounds like so you'll hear it. It goes like it goes higher pitch and lower pitch. It's like like that.
Yeah.
Okay.
So
But-
frequency increases.
Yes, because frequency and pitch as it relates to sound are a direct relationship. Yes. As it relates to sound, that's not always the case, but for sound waves that is the case.
So higher frequency is a higher pitch,
Yep.
and lower frequency is a lower pitch.
Right. So in this case, when the fire truck is moving towards the person, the frequency of the waves is
It's
increasing,
higher
higher pitch. But when it's moving away, the frequency is decreasing, so
As
it's
the
lower
pitch
pitch.
is the frequency like how fast?
The frequency is how often waves hit your ear, right?
Okay.
So, Caroline, if you're talking about something moving towards you, the first wave gets emitted from here, from this distance, right? And it takes a certain amount of time to get to your ear. But as I get closer, the distance that those waves have to travel is getting smaller, which means the time is getting reduced, so they hit your ear more frequently.